to Between the Lines, the show where we look deeper into the writing of classical literature. I'm Chris Harris.
And I'm Hayden Prickett. Today is December 7th, 2025, and this is episode 1115.
Now, in today's episode, we're going to look between the lines into the book Don Quixote and how his delusions are not as fantastical as they seem. But first, let's catch up on what's been happening since our last episode.
So, Chris, how's your week been?
My grandma died. What about you, Hayden?
Really good.
All right, well, let's dive into our topic today. We'll be discussing the mental illusions of Don Quixote and the treatment behind delusional disorder.
It's really interesting because you can see in the book that Don Quixote shows fixed false beliefs about being a knight-errant despite clear evidence to the contrary. Modern research would classify this as delusional disorder.
And the most popular example of one of Don Quixote's delusions is definitely his attack on some windmills, as he believed them to be giants.
Yeah, Cervantes' writing, intentional or not, shows clear signs of Don Quixote suffering from delusional disorder, exhibiting characteristics consistent with those outlined in the research article, A General Neuropsychological Model of Delusion.
To better explain the research, we have the author himself, Claude Braun. Welcome.
And thank you so much for having me on such an esteemed, critically acclaimed podcast. It is such a sincere honor to be invited on.
Mr. Braun, I first wanted to say I found your research fascinating. Could you please outline the goal you first had and the conclusion you made?
Of course. The most widely accepted thesis asserts that delusional belief is two specific neuropsychological deficits existing simultaneously, being an impairment initially prompting the delusional belief, and a second impairment interfering with processes of belief evaluation that cause the delusional belief to be rejected. Our research suggests that delusional beliefs is rapid inferencing from minimal evidence rather than a slower, balanced reasoning. The delusions aren't a specific deficit, but a cognitive propensity. The self constantly interprets minimal cues, leading to delusional beliefs centered around the self.
So, instead of some kind of issue that both causes the delusional belief and then inhibits the brain's ability to reject that delusional belief, it sounds like they're a quicker process where people are picking up really small cues and referencing them to themselves or something they want to be true. Now, do you think Don Quixote's excessive reference to self and reference to fantasy can be interpreted as delusional disorder?
Don Quixote is constantly misinterpreting events and cues, referencing them to himself or to his ideas of knight-errantry and chivalry.
Now, moving on to potential treatments, I wanted to talk about the new approaches to treatment for delusional disorder and how these contradict older traditional methods.
And these older methods use antipsychotic medications, which are most commonly antagonists of dopamine receptors. And to outline the ineffectiveness of these traditional treatments, I have Stephanie Wong, the author of an article regarding the association between striatal dopamine synthesis capacity and resolution of positive symptoms in first episode delusional disorder. Welcome.
And thank you so much for having me on such an esteemed, critically acclaimed, eye-opening, world-renowned podcast. Such a sincere honor to be invited on.
Ms. Wong, I found your research fascinating and wanted to first get a description of how you conducted your research.
Of course. Our study recruited 23 first episode patients, 12 with schizophrenia and 11 with delusional disorder, and 19 were followed up on after 19 months. All patients received a PET scan to measure their striatal dopamine synthesis capacity before or at onset of treatment, which involved antipsychotic medication.
And what does striatal dopamine synthesis capacity have to do with schizophrenia or delusional disorder? What even is it?
Striatal dopamine synthesis is the rate at which the striatum, a section in the forebrain responsible for motor control, reward-based learning, habit formation, and cognitive functions like decision-making, synthesizes dopamine. Lower SDSC is associated with negative symptoms in schizophrenia, Parkinson's, and other psychiatric conditions. The traditional treatment for mental disorders such as schizophrenia and delusional disorder are antipsychotic medications that block the dopamine receptors in the brain. Now, our study found that higher baseline dopamine synthesis capacity was strongly inversely correlated with negative symptom severity at 3 months for schizophrenic patients. In contrast, the delusional disorder group saw no significant association, and the severity of negative symptoms at 3 months was positively associated with more severe positive symptoms in the delusional disorder group. This study implies that baseline SDSC may help predict negative symptom trajectory in schizophrenic patients, while delusional disorder patient treatment may need to be reimagined, as a traditional antipsychotic medication may not show significant results. We can confidently predict the effectiveness of antipsychotic medication and treatment in schizophrenic patients, but the lack of significant association in delusional disorder patients highlights a need to reimagine treatment.
So, because there isn't an association between the rate at which we synthesize dopamine and symptoms of delusional disorder, medications that block dopamine sensors may not be effective.
And the research on this reimagined treatment is out there too, as we look at an article outlining a biopsychosocial treatment of delusional disorder. Now, this treatment is defined by a combination of pharmacological and psychological intervention, aiming for symptom stabilization and risk mitigation. Implementing therapeutic treatments along with medication resulted in stabilization and improvement in mental state. Ultimately, this article asserts that although delusional disorder is often seen as resistant, there is evidence base for a biopsychosocial approach.
And to tie all of this back to Don Quixote, a therapeutic approach, as outlined in this article, actually didn't work. Don Quixote met a tragic end as he came back to reality on his deathbed, denounced books of chivalry, and promptly died. And while we can't do any PET scans or case studies on Don Quixote, we can beg the question, could he have been cured through modern approaches? Raising awareness for delusional disorder is our ultimate goal in this episode, as we bring light to new studies and ideas surrounding the neurology and treatment of delusional disorder. So to recap what we covered today,
the main takeaway that me and Chris are walking away with is that mental disorders like delusional disorder are very complicated, as treatment definitely does not come easy, and we are just beginning to discover everything we can about these disorders.
And for me, I'm really interested in the neuroscience behind all of the disorders that we covered today. The relationship between dopamine and mental well-being, how the left hemisphere versus right hemisphere interpret signals and operate differently, suggesting different treatment and different methods for defining mental disorders depending on which part of the brain is being impacted. Now, we'd love to hear from you about delusional disorder, mental disorders, and anything we may not have clarified enough in this episode. You can reach us on our Instagram, Between the Line.
And don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and follow on social media.
Thank you guys so much for listening to Between the Lines.
Be back next week with another episode. Until then, I'm Hayden.
And I'm Chris. Take care.